By the time I entered the house, the gathering had already been in full swing, as if life itself had gathered there to remind me that the world can be noisy, colorful, and alive, despite the weariness that had settled somewhere deep within. Red checkered tablecloths, haphazardly covered with dishes and bottles, stood on every table. The air was thick with the scent of roast meat, wine, perfume, candles, and something warm, almost homely. Appetizers steamed on trays, and children scurried between the chairs, laughing and clumsily waving juice boxes like tiny, uncontrollable comets. Someone had brought an old speaker out onto the porch, and the first chords of Fleetwood Mac blared out, loud, insistent, so alive that the thin window panes trembled, as if they wanted to join in the dance. It was dirty, noisy, familiar, and somehow that hurt, because I didn't expect an ordinary evening to evoke so many memories and hopes. And before we continue, I want to thank you. I'm so glad you're watching this video on my channel. Please let me know in the comments if you hear stories like this. Do you remember someone in your life? Maybe yourself, someone close, or just a moment when everything suddenly changed. Tell me the first thing that came to mind. And yet, for the first time in a very long time, I allowed myself to believe, maybe not in anything specific, but simply in the possibility that things could get better. People smiled when I said hello, someone winked. Someone offered me a glass of sangria, and after some hesitation, I took it, feeling the cool glass pleasantly touch my palm. In the far corner, I saw my father, leaning against the back of a chair, laughing loudly and heartily, as if he'd just remembered what it felt like to laugh without forcing it. And in that moment, I thought, maybe everything really will be okay, maybe it won't be perfect, maybe it'll have its flaws, but at least this year no one will cry in the car, choking on something they haven't said. Chloe twirled around the room in her white sundress, barefoot, her hair disheveled, radiant as if the sun itself shone through her. She was like a lemon bar ad, light, sweet, slightly cloying, but beautiful, impossibly alive. In her hands was a frame, carefully wrapped in tissue paper and tied with a thin ribbon. I noted it briefly, not paying attention. Who knows what cute little thing she'd come up with next. I had a gift too. My brother and I had made a reservation for my parents at that very French restaurant they'd always talked about but somehow never made it to in all these years. The small reservation card was lying under my mother's plate, and I smiled, imagining her finding it. Everything was supposed to be peaceful, quiet gestures, shared food, a few awkward hugs, a few casual remarks, nothing extraneous, just an evening that was supposed to be a step toward peace. But then Chloe stood up. Someone, for some unknown reason, handed her the microphone, and she laughed sweetly, covering her mouth with her hand, as if to say, "Oh my God, I never intended to say anything," and from the way she laughed, I realized she'd probably been rehearsing this for days. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, clapping her hands twice, as if calling a kindergarten class to order. "I just have something for our wonderful parents." She turned, walked over to Mom, and handed her the frame. I saw right away, it was a collage, photos of the three of them, vacations by the sea, birthdays, random shots on the porch. For a moment, everything froze, even the music seemed to stop, and I felt a cold wave rise in my throat. My face wasn't there, not in a single photo, not even in the corner, not even on the edge. Mom blinked, as if she couldn't believe her eyes, and then smiled, that smile that always held more weariness than warmth. She stood slowly, raised her glass, and said, "This is the daughter who always loved us." Several people applauded, someone uttered an admiring ah, and then Mom, as if remembering that her role wasn't finished yet, added louder, "And the other one," without even looking in my direction. The room grew so quiet that I heard a fork drop somewhere nearby. Someone coughed awkwardly. And that moment dragged on, viscous, agonizing, like melted wax. I didn't look around, didn't search for anyone's sympathy. I only felt the air around me thicken with awkwardness, how the silence became alive, ringing, how everyone pretended nothing had happened. I didn't say a word, didn't ask why, didn't cry, though the tears were already welling up like hot steam from within. I simply picked up my bag, carefully, slowly walked to the door, and walked out. No scene, no loud words, no drama. Just this strange, searing clarity. If I stay even a second longer, I'll never be able to forget how silent everyone was. I drove home in silence, as if the sound of my breathing or the squeal of my tires on the pavement could upset the delicate balance between anger and pain that suddenly became the only thing keeping me from crying. No music, no radio, just the steady hum of the highway, the lights blurring into long golden threads, and my own list, which, as always, began to form in my head. How many times had I wired them money without thinking, without reminders, simply because I knew they needed it? How many bills had I paid so they could get through another difficult month without the burden of shame? How many birthdays had I missed, sitting in the office until midnight just to make their mortgage payment on time? 9 years, I counted, 9 years of covering their bills, throwing in cash, solving problems no one knew about, and without even expecting a thank you, and then, in front of 52 people, I was simply erased, as if I'd never existed. Oh well, I told myself then, smiling as if I could do that automatically, and left. 15 hours later, my phone exploded with notifications, 38 missed calls. The first came at 6:17 in the morning, astonishing courage, considering none of them had cared where I'd gone when I left that house the day before. Mom called first, then Dad a couple of times, and then the real spectacle began. 14 calls in a row from Chloe, 14. The girl who hadn't found a reason to call for months unless she needed help with her taxes suddenly turned into a persistent telemarketer of family affection. I stood in the kitchen, made coffee, strong, bitter, no sugar, just the way I liked it, and sat on the edge of the counter, watching the screen as her name lit up over and over again. The phone trembled, as if trying to elicit some kind of reaction from me, but all I felt was calm, thick, viscous, almost icy. Finally, I picked up. Not out of generosity, no, more out of curiosity. I wanted to hear the tone with which they would open this new act of family drama. "Oh, thank God," Chloe breathed out, "we didn't know where you went. Are you okay?" I sipped my coffee, slowly, savoring the sip. "Fine," I replied, and perhaps for the first time in my life, it was true. Well, she hesitated. "We can't get on the boat." "Which boat?" I raised my eyebrows, though she couldn't see it. "Well, our group tour," her voice sharpened, "the sightseeing tour we booked for this morning. We showed up, and they told us the event was cancelled, something about the card being declined." I said calmly, "That's it." There was a pause, one of those moments filled with nervous breathing and uncertainty. "But the card that was registered," she said carefully, "was yours." "I cancelled it." There was a silence in which I could almost hear her blinking in surprise. "But why?" she finally exhaled. "Mom and Dad are panicking." "Because," I said, keeping my voice low, "Mom stood up in front of 52 people and announced that I didn't lift a finger, so, I thought, why not make it true?" Silence again, only a faint hiss on the line. "Okay," she muttered, "but the whole trip?" I replied, "and the accommodations too. You cancelled their cabin?" "It was in my name, Chloe, they don't even have return tickets." "But..." She trailed off, clearly unsure how to finish her sentence. "Well, then, I suppose," I said, looking out the window at the gray, sleepy sky, "you'll have to pay for their tickets." "I don't have the money," she admitted, almost in a whisper. "It's okay," I took a last sip of coffee. "You're the daughter who always loved them, I'm sure they'll understand." And I hung up, no anger, no triumph, simply, closing the deal. No sense of victory, no relief, just a quiet stillness, as if the air around me had thickened and become still, like water before a storm. After 9 years of constant care, endless transfers, bill payments, electricity, groceries, insurance, dentist appointments that somehow became urgent every 6 months, silence seemed the most honest answer. They had no idea how much of my life their needs consumed, no idea how many nights I woke up anxiously checking my bank account balance to make their payment on time, and I never threw it in their faces. I never said, "Hey, just so you know, I paid for this trip you're all so eagerly awaiting." I didn't need applause, I didn't need thank you speeches. I just wanted to be treated as a person who was there, who mattered. But apparently, the framed photo collage from Chloe meant more to them. Want to know the worst? I wasn't even surprised. The moment my mother raised her glass and said those words, "Here's the daughter who always loved us," I felt neither shock nor anger, only a quiet recognition, as if I'd simply heard a familiar melody, the words to which I knew by heart. It didn't arise suddenly, didn't escape her lips by chance, it was the result of years of the same pattern, a familiar rhythm in which each of us had already played our part. Chloe had always been a star, the one who shines in any room. Who knows how to charm, who laughs so loudly that everyone turns their heads, a performer, creative, eccentric, with a perpetual twinkle in her eye and a chaotic mess of hair. I remember back in high school, she'd force her parents to help her mix some ridiculous CDs of songs she'd recorded in the kitchen, then hand them handwritten cards covered in glitter that would hang around the house for weeks. They'd smile, gush, tell her how talented she was, how alive, and they'd lap it up, every gesture, every hint of artistry. I was different, reliable, predictable, the one who never let you down. I graduated from college, found a good job, moved 2 hours away, paid my taxes on time, paid off my student loans, and helped my mom refinance her mortgage when my dad was too embarrassed to ask. They'd call Chloe when they wanted someone to come over and drink wine, and they'd call me when the water heater broke or they needed to sort out a bank statement. She gave them time and I gave them money, and guess which one of us had the best lighting in family photos? It wasn't always like that. When we were kids, they'd say, "You girls are so different, but both so special." Those words still sounded like a promise, but around the time I was 24, they became redundant. That's when I started earning enough to pay for things they couldn't afford. By then, Chloe, well, she mostly just changed jobs, a bit of an actress, then a yoga teacher, then a handmade jewelry maker, then a self-improvement consultant. It all changed like the seasons. She lived with them for almost 10 years after college, in their house in Rentry, and my parents always said, "She's just finding her way," and they believed she would. And I once paid their property taxes so the house wouldn't go into foreclosure. You'd think that should mean something. After all, I literally saved the roof over their heads, but I never reminded them of this, never expected them to thank me. I didn't ask for a refund, didn't expect gratitude. I didn't need them to write poems about me or post photos online with the caption, "Our wonderful daughter." I just wanted my mom to smile genuinely, not forcefully, when I visited, so that my dad would ask how I was, not because that's the way it's supposed to be, but at the reunion, standing in the corner of the room and watching my mom talk about Chloe as if she'd moved mountains, and I stood there, quiet, unnecessary, transparent. I felt something inside me crack quietly. It wasn't a loud explosion, not a storm, just a tiny internal snap, as if the thin thread that held my patience together had finally snapped. It wasn't her words, not the toast, but the way everyone around me nodded. No one blinked, no one looked confused or surprised. They listened and agreed, and that, how easily everyone accepted this version, as if it were the truth. That's what made the pain palpable. Of course, it was Chloe who was always there. Of course, I didn't lift a finger. Everything was logical, everything was in place. So, when I got home that night, I opened my laptop, the screen lit the kitchen with a cold light, and I began, one by one, canceling all the automatic transfers, closing orders, pausing my mortgage payments. The food card was canceled, the gas card I'd topped up every month was closed. Every time their old furnace broke down, I'd opened a new account to pay for the repairs, and now I simply hit close, even the dentist bill due the next day. I left unsent. It wasn't rage, it wasn't revenge, it was a crystal, cold clarity. If I was invisible to them, fine, but I wasn't going to pay for that privilege anymore. I could have written a message, explained everything, told them how I felt, why I was doing this, but they had made their choice publicly. Let them live with the consequences now, quietly, without applause. The next day, I didn't hear a single word from them, not a call, not a message, and it was almost touching. Someone, probably Chloe, must have suggested they give her space, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum because they didn't buy him the snack he needed, and not a grown woman who had just been publicly erased in front of 52 people after 6 years spent supporting a house I didn't even live in. But please, give me space. Of course, that was always more than enough. By Monday, they were home. I found out by accident. My dad's Facebook page had changed location, and under a new photo of them standing by the dock, beaming their forced smiles, the caption appeared, "Wonderful weekend with family, we are so lucky." The word family suddenly became so jarring that I found myself staring at the screen for a long time, as if there was even a hint of me there. But, of course, not a word about me. The radio silence continued, even, thick, like autumn fog, where nothing can be seen and it's impossible to tell where indifference ends and cowardice begins. I imagined their return, evening, the old house in Rentry, the doors opening with their familiar click, the smell of dust that had absorbed years of their lives. Mom takes off her coat, sets her bag against the wall, goes into the kitchen, turns on the light, and at that very second, something goes wrong. Maybe the cable TV isn't loading, maybe the thermostat is flashing an alarming orange, warning of a low battery. Maybe the grocery delivery isn't arriving as usual, or, more likely, the automatic bank transfer for the mortgage, which always came first, isn't coming at all. I could practically see Mom blinking at the phone screen, where a red notification flashes. Payment declined. She winces, checks another bill, then another, gas, water, the credit card in my name, which they supposedly used only for emergencies but which for some reason regularly showed up with concert ticket purchases, was also declined. Not that I was keeping an eye on it, but my inbox itself reminded me of their new reality. Emails arrived one after another: failed payment, rejected transfer, charge error. It was like the slow but surprisingly satisfying fall of dominoes, quiet, precise, and predictable. They must have called the bank, because that same day I received a notification: 2 attempts to log into the joint account I'd once authorized them to access for household expenses, a new device, a new geolocation, and, sure enough, after the second attempt, the system blocked my access. I chuckled, oops. That same evening, around 9:30, there was a knock on my door. It was almost immediately after I turned off my laptop. I stood in the kitchen, frozen, listening. The dull, leisurely knocks, confident, without fuss. I didn't open the door. I simply stood in the hallway, my back pressed against the wall, staring at the wooden door, as if eyes might appear in it, watching me. And then I heard my mother's voice, that same one. A little hoarse, painfully familiar. "Nadia," she said quietly. I didn't answer, but then she said my name again, a little louder, with that trembling tone she acquired when she tried to appear calm. I sighed and opened the door. She stood in the threshold, tired, as if she'd aged another 10 years in the past couple of days. No makeup, her hair disheveled, wearing the thin cardigan she always wore when she wanted to look fragile and helpless. Her father stood behind her, his expression a mixture of reserve, embarrassment, and hurt. He wasn't angry, he simply stood there, arms folded across his chest, as if he didn't know what to do with himself. "Can I come in?" Mom asked. "No," I answered calmly, "but we can talk here." She looked around, as if she were embarrassed to stand on my porch, under the streetlight, in full view of the neighbors. "We just wanted to clear the air," she began. "Of course," I said, not moving. "What happened at the reunion?" she asked cautiously. "You mean when you stood up in front of 52 people and told them I didn't lift a finger?" I clarified. "That didn't sound like it did," she tried to defend herself. I bowed my head slightly. "I think it sounded pretty clear." "It was a moment," she breathed out. "Chloe just showed us that picture, everyone was looking, and she was going through a tough time. You know how hard it is for her. She's trying, she just wanted to do something nice." I laughed softly, almost silently. "And so you decided to declare her a good daughter? And what am I, an afterthought?" "It's not fair," Mom said, and for the first time, sincerity rang in her voice. "No," I replied, feeling everything inside me escalate to the breaking point. "It's not fair to pay over $150,000 in your bills for the last 15 years and hear that I haven't lifted a finger." Her face froze. My father blinked, as if someone had flipped a switch. I hadn't intended to say it out loud, but the words came out, and in that instant, I felt as if a weight I'd been carrying for too long had been lifted from my shoulders. "By the way, that number is real," I added. "I did the math. Mortgage payments, utilities, groceries, those unexpected dentist bills, and the time I paid off Chloe's credit card because she couldn't breathe from stress. It all adds up, Mom, everything." Then the comments started pouring in, one after another, like drops falling into warm water, a soft sound, but inevitably causing ripples. "She left because what you said upset her." Some wrote, "It wasn't even rude, you just told the truth." Others echoed, and, of course, someone added, "If someone gets offended by the truth, they have their reasons." No one mentioned my name, and they didn't need to. The quote, spoken in front of 52 people, had long since taken on a life of its own. Known, retold, discussed, as if it weren't about me but some character on a TV show. Most of those present were on Facebook. Everyone had seen the photo of Mom and Chloe smiling, holding the frame, several distant relatives added sad emojis, someone left a vaguely religious meme about forgiveness, and still others simply a heart. No one, of course, asked what I'd been up to for the past decade and a half. No one thought to wonder why a cruise ship, a paid cabin, and dinner for the whole family miraculously disappeared from their lives precisely after I left. I wasn't tagged, but I saw everything. Friends sent screenshots, and one of them, with a shrug emoji, somehow proved to be the final straw. At first, I kept quiet, let them talk, let each of them paint the version they find most comfortable believing, but then someone wrote, "She was always kind of cold, huh? Didn't really get involved, and my mom liked it." I stared at that tiny sign of approval for a long time, then simply opened my laptop. No anger, no trembling hands, no desire for revenge, just that feeling of inner clarity that comes when you have nothing left to lose. One post, no comments, no sarcasm, no accusations, just screenshots, bank transfers, payment confirmations, receipt photos, emails about closed accounts, mortgage payment confirmations. I posted everything, and at the bottom, the total, in case anyone gets tired of scrolling. Over the years, I've paid $48,600 on their mortgage, another $35,760 in utilities, grocery cost me $21,240, medical expenses, prescriptions, and copays $7,880. When the roof collapsed, I transferred $6,850 without hesitation. Chloe's tuition, which my parents later proudly recounted at family reunions, cost me $17,950. The car repairs last winter cost $8,101, even for that cancelled family vacation, when for the first time in years I just wanted to be with them. I paid a deposit of $2,300, and dozens of other small expenses that I've already stopped counting, altogether, $147,880. I didn't tag anyone, I didn't comment, I just published it. I left the post open, closed my laptop, and went to bed. By morning, Mom's original post had disappeared, 3 more, too, the ones that tried to justify her, and then the messages came, from my aunt, "I didn't know you did all that, you always kept quiet," from my cousin James, "That's crazy, if I were you, I'd never talk to them again," from my mother, "Nothing, emptiness," but from Chloe came a short, "Okay, we need to talk." The next time I saw her, she had dark circles under her eyes and was carrying a reusable supermarket bag. She looked thinner, but not in a good, radiant way, more like her body had given up before her mind. "Can we talk?" she asked, not looking directly. "No," I replied, and then, guardedly, "Hi." I stepped aside, and she walked in, as if she still had the right, as if the house still smelled of our childhood, and not of my loneliness. "They forced me to get a job," she said, as if confessing to a crime. "Welcome to adulthood," I replied dryly, putting the kettle on. "I'm serious, Nadia," she said, and for the first time in a long time, her voice sounded less confident. "Me too," I replied. She tossed the bag on the counter. Inside were canned soup, a couple of packages of cheap ramen, a roll of plain paper towels, and that was it. No vegetables, no bread, no coffee. "They said I should help because you're gone," she said, pausing for a second, as if surprised by what she'd said, "and apparently, you were the one doing everything right." Her voice wavered as she said it, and I saw something like confusion flicker in her eyes. She, of course, immediately pulled herself together, but it was too late, the confession had already been made. "That's what they said," she added hastily, "I mean not exactly, but it's hard for them." I nodded, looking at her calmly. "They chose you, Chloe," I said quietly, "right there, at the reunion, in front of everyone, you were the daughter who always loved them." She blinked, and I saw her lips tremble, as if she were trying to say something in response, but the words were stuck somewhere deep inside, where there wasn't enough air to justify herself. "I was just trying to be polite," she said, looking at the floor, as if ashamed of her own words. "I didn't know Mom would say that, and you didn't correct her." I was caught off guard. I stood by the door, feeling the weariness I'd accumulated over the years rise inside me like a warm wave, making it hard to breathe, and I answered quietly, without irritation, simply stating the fact. "No, you knew, you liked it." She didn't deny it. She just slumped her shoulders, as if giving in. "They need help," she whispered after a pause, and her voice rang with the same tone that had sounded in my mother's requests before, when they both still believed that I would always help, then help them. I answered calmly, "I can't afford everything." She breathed out barely audibly. I looked at her, really, for the first time in a long time. Before me stood not my sister, not the daughter of a happy family from postcards, but a woman with dull eyes, disheveled hair, a wrinkled shirt, and arms too thin to look strong. She didn't sleep, didn't eat, didn't live. She was falling apart right before my eyes. I took a deep breath and said, "Try harder," and closed the door behind her. This time they all came together, Mom, Dad, and Chloe. They stood on my porch, the three of them, awkward and lost, like children called to the principal's office for something they couldn't even explain. They didn't knock at first, just stood there, until I noticed them through the window. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. Mom was the first to break the silence. Her voice was quiet, older than I remembered. "I'm sorry," she said, and the words seemed to come with difficulty. Dad was silent. Chloe stood a little behind me, hunched over, her eyes empty, not seeking forgiveness, but simply resignedly accepting whatever was to come. "We shouldn't have said what we said," Mom began. "It was stupid. We didn't think." "No," I interrupted, "you did. You just didn't think it would cost you anything." She lowered her eyes, and for the first time I saw in her not the strength with which she had once frightened us both, but a tired person, confused by her own actions. It was at that moment, Chloe said quietly, "You know how Mom can be, and I liked hearing that. It's my fault, I know, but that's not what we meant." Mom, standing next to me, suddenly interjected, wearily, almost in a whisper, "Not quite." I nodded. "It doesn't matter now. You made a choice, you have to understand." "No," I said, "you have to understand." I straightened up, feeling the crushing weight that had forced me to justify myself for years finally disappear. "You told 52 people that I didn't lift a finger for this family," I said, my voice even, "while I paid your mortgage, your bills, while my name was on your insurance, your utilities, everything that kept your house afloat. I paid $147,880 to be erased." No one answered. Dad turned away. Mom swallowed, as if the words were stuck in her throat. Chloe stared at her shoes. The silence stretched, thick as fabric you can't penetrate. I waited, for screaming, for excuses, for tears, for anything living, but nothing happened. Just three people who finally realized what they had lost forever. "I'm not angry anymore," I said, "I've had enough," and I closed the door. Several months passed. There was a silence in the house, not the kind that makes you feel lonely, but a soft, hard-won silence that finally made you breathe. I heard Chloe had moved out. She'd held out longer than I thought, but it all proved too much. Bills, errands, late-night calls, the always-open refrigerator, emptying faster than it filled. Everything I'd once done in silence had caught up with her. She'd rented a tiny apartment far away and left no forwarding address. And soon I learned that my parents had sold the house, the very one I'd helped keep afloat for 9 years, the one they said I'd done nothing to save. They took what they could and moved into a cheap house with thin walls and a flickering light in the hallway. I know this because my cousin was driving by and sent me a photo, a dim one taken on his phone. I looked at it and felt nothing, no anger, no joy, no regret, just silence. I never came back, not because I'm angry, but because I've had enough. Some people think family is forever, but others, like me, know that only pain is forever if you don't stop in time. Family isn't blood, it's a choice, and I finally made mine. And if anyone wants to ask whether I've gone too far, or, on the contrary, not far enough, please leave a comment and subscribe.